What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
What happens behind the scenes to ensure deals get signed, press releases get written, and records get released? What are the negotiations like? How much is fine print and how much is it Indian restaurants, evenings in the pub, and visits to the famous shed? Hello, I'm Mark Fisher, and in this episode of What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, we're going to be hearing from 4 music biz insiders who had the good fortune to work with XTC at different points in their career. Not only that, but they are all massive fans of the band. Ronnie Gurr went from producing a punk fanzine as a teenager to working for Record Mirror and then getting a job in the Virgin Press office. Mike Smith went from A&R into music publishing and signed Andy Partridge to Warner Chappell as a songwriter. Ben Wardle also worked in A&R and paved the way for one of the collaborations between Andy and Stephen Duffy. He also worked with Andy Partridge. And Yui Mura got tantalisingly close to releasing a series of XTC retrospective collections by dint of being in the right place at the right time. All their stories are to come, but first let's get warmed up with some of the noise you have been making. Every episode we play a song that has been influenced in some way by XTC, and this time it's the turn of Jordan Cooper and his song, This Place. Here he is to introduce it.
What do you call that noise?
Hello, Mark, and what do you call that noise? And all the listeners, this is Jordan Cooper. I am honored that you are letting me talk about this song and playing this song of mine. This is called This Place. It's saying the word this a lot. I wrote this in February 2001. That's over 20 years ago. And I only recorded it last year, so that's a long gestation period. But I still distinctly remember the influence behind the song, which was a very specific XTC kind of branch, which was the piano songs on Nonsuch. I had gotten kind of obsessed with trying to figure out XTC songs, and I remember learning Wrapped in Grey. I remember trying to learn Rook. I remember not quite understanding the piano riff throughout Omnibus, but Wrapped in Grey was really one that I was just blown away by the chord shapes and just how, you could say this for his guitar stuff too, but how they both felt wrong and right at the same time. It's like, oh, those notes are too smashed together in this chord. But it's like, but why does it sound so beautiful? You know, why does that transition from one chord to the other sound so, I don't know, heavenly or almost supernatural or something? So at the time, I was writing a big handful of songs all about this one 20-minute walk from the subway in Queens, New York, to my house that I lived at home with my parents. And I'd always get home at night, and it'd always be this, you walk past a cemetery in this, which is in the song lyrics, if you catch it. There's Maple Grove Cemetery is on the way home. There's my old public school that I used to go to. There's all these kind of sights and sounds from my life that I used to walk past every day coming home. And I wrote just like a big handful of songs all about this. And some of these songs are found on my Woke Up Dark single, which is a single from my new album also called Woke Up Dark. For me, it's a very ambitious piano song. It does that Andy Partridge songwriting thing where it goes from dissonant verses to like then a more soothing and cathartic sounding chorus. And you can definitely hear that, you know, as you listen. Like the chorus has a chord, I'm reading it right now, B flat sustained 2 major 7th. What is that? That's crazy. You need all your fingers for that one. In terms of like the lyrical inspiration from XTC, I was inspired similar with Nonsuch and with Andy Partridge's style, like, you know, songs like Humble Daisy. There's not really a story in the song. It's more that it's a poem kind of just observing something, or like Ladybird, just sort of like a very sensory poem of giving you the like 5 senses, you know. So the kind of poetic lyrics where I'm just like really obeying these syllable rules, and I'm not writing, this is a big Andy Partridge influence, is not writing in complete sentences for the lyrics, just saying like Like one of the verses just says, empty streets, AM dark, moon reflection, forest park. You know, it's like I'm just giving you these little words that go together and small phrases that sometimes don't even make grammatical sense, but there's like a poetry to them. And that for me was absolutely a big Andy Partridge gift that he kind of gave me as a lyricist, to be like, oh, I don't have to write a complete sentence. I could leave out the kind of little words like the and transitional words, and I could just put the words that I want to use, you know, the most important words, the adjectives and the nouns and stuff. But anyway, please enjoy This Place. And you could find this at my Bandcamp and on Spotify under my band name, which is Troubles Afoot. Check it out. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Look around you. See this town. It surrounds you. Lights and sounds. I don't know anyone on my block. I know that tree and that bus stop. Oh, you can live in this place, eat at a diner where they know your face. Run away screaming, run away smiling, sleep in your home, the only place you know. Empty streets, AM dark, moon reflection, forest park, distant holler, rumbling train tracks. This town only listens when you listen back. Oh, you can breathe in this place, sit on a park bench as daylight's erased. Run away swimming, run away flying, sleep your bed inside your room on the stairs. Wet brick fence, grassy field, beautiful sunset over the dead. Oh, you can move from this place, flat in a town map and learn how to trace. Run away sitting, run away standing, think of the things you disowned and gradually explode.
What do you call that noise?
Thank you very much, Jordan. You can hear more of that kind of thing at Jordan's SoundCloud, Bandcamp and Spotify pages under the name of Troubles Afoot. And if you go deep into the XTC podcast archives, you can hear Jordan talking about They Might Be Giants, and particularly their song XTC versus Adamant. Good to have you back, Jordan. If you have an XTC-inspired song, feel free to let me know at mark@xtclimelight.com, although there is a long waiting list ahead of you, I'm afraid. If you've been enjoying What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, and of course you have, well, remember, I couldn't do it without the brilliant people who support the podcast on Patreon. Many, many thanks to all of you who have contributed. And if you'd like to do the same, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and decide on your level of support. There are 3 levels, and if you opt to be a knight in shining armor, I'll read out your name at the end of each episode. And a regular reminder, you can buy your copy of What Do You Call That Noise, an XTC Discovery book at xtclimelight.com. And you'll also find details of all the podcasts there as well. Enough of all that. Let's go into the discussion with Ronnie Gur, Mike Smith, Ben Wardle, and Youie Mura.
What do you call that noise?
We're talking about the music industry today. Welcome to five very, very interesting people with very strong XTC connected credentials, all of whom had worked at different points in the music industry. We've got Ronnie Gur, we've got Mike Smith, who's not to be confused with the Mike Smith who was involved in running a recent XTC convention, Ben Wardle and Yui Mura, and all of them have interesting stories, and I'm very much looking forward to all of them. So let's just throw ourselves right in. Normally I'd introduce people, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves and say why they're here. Possibly you could also choose, if you feel like it, an XTC song that you associate with the time that you were associated with the band. But I'm going to begin with Ronnie Gur, who is known as a music industry consultant when he's not being a football manager.
I'm a director. I'm not a manager. I'm a director of my local club. So.
Well, there are limits to your limits to your abilities. And he, actually, crucially, that we should mention for Ronnie, he is also, amongst his many other talents, the publisher of Hanging Around Books, which has produced 2 XTC-related photo books. There's one on the camera we can see now.
There's the big A4 size one.
A4 size, which is, there's 2 of them. Swindon Works, which is Jill Firmanovsky, who is a previous guest on the podcast from 1978, and Virginia Turbitt's Travels in Nihilon from 1980. So
that's right.
Ronnie has a number of XTC credentials. Ronnie, tell us your story. Who, what, why, where, when?
I think I saw the band for the first time in '77 in Edinburgh at Clouds, and I thought they were great, and I bought all the records. I wouldn't have said they were my favourite band. My fanzine was called Hanging Around, so that might give you a clue who my favourite band was at the time, Strangles. And then I had a punk fanzine, but then I joined Record Mirror as a journalist and saw them a couple of times. Firstly, Virgin had a junket on the release of Drums and Wires in '79. They took us up to Slough. Really exotic. A lot of journalists were getting trips to Los Angeles and New York. We got taken to Slough in a bus by Al Clark from Virgin, and they were phenomenal. I don't know if I imagined this, because obviously the earlier album was black and white, but they had a light show, and I can't find any evidence of this anywhere. But Andy had taken old Cine 8 film and had scratched and doodled all over it, and then they just projected it on the stage, and it just looked incredible. But when I told Andy about this, he said that the lighting guy was actually Scottish, and I've since traced him down. He now runs a lighting company in Edinburgh, Mark, so you might want to...
Oh, yeah, I should trace him down as well, yeah.
Follow up with him. But only in XTC world could their lighting guy be... His nickname was the Prince of Darkness. So that, and then I saw them at the Music Machine, I guess less than a month after that, which I think I might reviewed for Record Mirror. Thereafter, I joined Virgin Records in the press office in 1982, and I did their press on Mumma, which was 83, I guess. So I had no dealings with them at all, and then out the blue, Andy phoned and said he wanted to do a photo session. I say I did their press. I wrote some press releases and updated their biog, and oversaw an awful photo session, which is grim. I actually looked at it today. It's basically a miserable trio sheltering in a tent amongst discarded newspapers, and it's just completely unusable in press terms. A little more usable than the actual Mummer session, where they actually all dressed up as mummers, which you'll have seen as the reissued album cover, which of course was completely useless because nobody knew who they were, which was the point actually. But try explaining that to a local newspaper who want to print the latest photo of XTC. So, and thereafter, my next encounter with them was in '96. I joined V2. I was re-recruited by Branson back into the fold. He'd sold the company to EMI in 91, 92, I can't remember exactly when it was, and couldn't, actually must have been 91, because he couldn't start a record company for 5 years. There was a kind of non-competitive clause. And he got in touch with me and said, I'm thinking of getting back into it, would you be interested? To which I said, well, I'm currently working for Sony, and you never paid as much as other record companies historically. And he said, didn't we? I said, of course you didn't. You know that you didn't. So, but anyway, I went back to V2, and I'd heard that there was a new album coming, or albums coming, and got in touch with Paul Bailey, who had been the tour manager and was kind of looking after them at that point. And had one of the most memorable days ever. I went up to Swindon. Hadn't heard anything. I went up to Swindon, and Andy didn't play me anything. I spent the afternoon with him. I didn't hear any of the music, except what he did do was he played me Drimble Wedge in the Vegetation from the Bedazzled movie. Peter Cook's the devil in Bedazzled, and Dudley Moore's his kind of dupe. And he wants to be a pop star, so he makes him a pop star. And they play, Dudley Moore does a song called Love Me. You'll have to look this up on the internet, it's terrific. And Love Me is basically a totally craven 60s pop song, and he's in a tinfoil, silver suit. And then he's completely upstaged by Peter Cook, who is the devil, I think George Spigot, who does Bedazzled, which is a kind of monotone precursor for krautrock, actually. So, and yeah, based two sides of the industry, the love me and hate me. The best line in the song is "You fill me with inertia." Can you not leave it out and stuff like that? It's just everything's negative in the Peter Cook one, everything's positive in the. Anyway, he showed me that and was raving about it, and then he said it became like a pub quiz. It was a total education of an afternoon. He said, what classic pop song has got a swear word in? I'm not doing the accent. What classic pop song has got a swear word in, and you can hear it audibly? I said, well, you can't. Obviously, it can't be a classic because it wouldn't have got on radio. He said, no, it was a huge record, #1 everywhere. It's an absolute classic. And he had you remember the Beatles reissues, which were the blue and red, which were mono stereo, and you could just change the balance, and you got so he put it all in the treble. And sure enough, out the speaker, at 2 minutes 57 into Hey Jude, you hear, fucking hell. And once you've heard that, you'll never not hear it in the full track. It's remarkable. So that was an education.
Ronnie, was that George?
No, Andy told me it was Lennon, but I subsequently found that it was McCartney. Andy told me that they insisted on, George Martin insisted on doing it in one take. And Lennon was playing, the acoustic, and, if it faltered, they started again. So they were on about the sixth take. And he's into, 2 minutes 57, and he just goes, fucking hell. That's what Andy told me, but I think subsequently it may be McCartney on the piano saying fucking hell. I don't know. Anyway, I'd never heard that before. And then he dug out an album, and he went there. It's amazing. It's Nirvana meets the Hollies, and it was the Posies frosting on the beater. And it is, if you listen to it, he played Dream All Day and Definite Door, which is Nirvana doing Hollies cover versions. I think he got that from John Leckie, because John Leckie had just been passed over on the production. I think John had done the first Posies album, but he hadn't done this one. And then he then broke out the Colt's Foot rock, Colt's Foot being a herbal sweetie. So he ate herbal sweeties and discussed all manner of stuff. And then he actually sent me the demos. So this was 96. So Apple Venus didn't come out till 3 years later, is that right?
Yeah, 1999, yeah.
So I think over the course of that 18 months, we made an offer which was phenomenal. I just went back and said we should, break man. I don't think there was any. There was obviously bad blood between Virgin, but the Branson period, Virgin, there was never any bad blood at that at that time. I think it subsequently changed, and maybe Mike can speak to that about the change in ownership. I mean, they were on a terrible deal. They had what's laws of libel. They had poor management. I think nobody would dispute that. However, Virgin stuck with them. That was the one thing that I loved working about Virgin. Simon Draper would stick with a band. If they got one good review or one DJ or some local press and it was going in the right direction, you would do a second album. And you'd even do a third album. With no quantifiable success, or hit success, or however you want to term it. So Virgin did stick with them and got the results. So I think when I was working there, they'd just done the Geffen deal, which I know that Andy subsequently audited them and found quite a lot of money, royalties that were due. So there was issues like that, but we made a really hefty offer for them in '96, having heard those demos, which were just brilliant, and not that different from what ended up coming out. I mean, it was all there. There was you didn't have to second guess it. It was just brilliant. But then Cook and Vinyl made them a deal, which I think was at that time a real first. They essentially, Cook and Vinyl inverted the traditional artist deal. So if you want to call it, I don't know, if an artist was getting a 15% royalty, the record company were keeping 85. Cook and Vinyl turned that on its head, and I think the band were getting the lion's share of it. So it was more like a distribution deal. And they'd also got the TVT deal. And again, be very careful of libel laws when it comes to TVT, but I think off air I'll tell you some stories about TVT. So yeah, we didn't get, but I kept in touch with Andy, and I used to go up and have lunch with him a couple of times a year, and it was always the most entertaining day of the year. It was an absolute joy. So I think he just liked my Scottish accent. That was it. Actually, the one thing I thought the masterstroke, which would get us the deal in '96, and I was just remembering this morning, was it was a thing called webcasts. And in '96, Ryuichi Sakamoto did the first webcast, I think, if not the first, one of the first, from the Royal Festival Hall. And I'd had such a great day, I said to Andy, almost as I was going out the door in Swindon, I said, Ryuichi Sakamoto's doing this thing from the Festival Hall soon. I can't, it was sometime during 1996. And it's amazing because what you could do is because Andy had picked up the guitar and played me some stuff, just bizarre chords and stuff. So it wasn't true. I didn't hear any of his music. I didn't hear any of those demos, but he'd played me stuff and sang stuff to me, and it was great. Most entertaining afternoon. I said, you could do that on this thing called the internet, And I thought, that's the masterstroke. You don't have to go out and do gigs. You can actually, you can sit in your front room in Swindon and entertain people that way. I remember saying, I think it's Mitsubishi that are organised it. And he said, oh, great, it'll be billed as from the people that brought you Pearl Harbor, which has stuck with me. Of course, that actually was a huge flop because I think once about 50 people were online, the whole thing fell over. So, but it seemed like an interesting possibility that might appeal to Andy, given the situation with the non-live appearances. So, and then, as you say, we'd kept in touch over the years, and I've always collected photography books and music photography, and basically there was a number of things. The British Library exhibited a copy of my fanzine in 2016 it was, and my wife wanted me to clear out my archive, which she calls our garage, which it's not, it's my archive. And I found some photos that I'd taken of Simple Minds when I was 21 in Berlin, East Berlin. We went through for the day. It was one of my last jobs as a journalist on Record Mirror. And I'm not a photographer, but I'd taken some photos, and I'd read a book called Self-Publish, Be Happy. And so all those things came together, and I thought I should basically publish little photo zines, and got in touch with some photographers, one of which was Virginia Turbot, and she had these amazing shots from New York. She'd covered Strictly Sounds, and they're just little photo essays. The 36-page A5, although as I say, I'm going up to A4. Largely Andy's instigation, actually. It was Andy said you should do these in A4. He really was incredibly supportive. Yeah, maybe we'll do that for the convention next year. We'll see.
Yeah, you'd have a ready market there for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I haven't seen Andy of late, but yeah, that's my interactions with him.
Well, that's a very brilliant overview, Ronnie, and it's given me about 10 million questions, but I'm not going to ask any of them because I'm going to move to Mike Smith now. And before I get Mike to talk, I'm going to read a quote from Andy Partridge, because this is the best introduction anybody could possibly get. Andy says, "There are very few people I trust in the music industry, and with good reason, but one of the rare few is Mike Smith. When Mike asked me to come with him to Warner Chappell, I jumped at the chance, knowing that when Mike says something gets done, it gets done. He's got a great sense for pairing people up and what's going to work artistically and what isn't. An excellent ear for good music. I am more than pleased to be aboard the good ship Warner Chappell with Captain Mike at the helm. Sail on." That's not a bad recommendation, Mike.
I'd forgotten that. That's really lovely. Thank you for bringing that up. I'll be able to float through the day on that. That's a wonderful compliment.
So that's the end of your career, which is kind of about publishing. When you first came across XTC, it was in a different capacity, was it?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, as a fan growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was a huge fan of XTC, and all kinds of punk rock and new wave caught my imagination, but I've always been drawn to the more, I guess, melodic and song-orientated side of things. And there was something about XTC's songwriting that really connected with me. And I stayed on board through all of the different sort of like travails of the songwriting, when they went from being quite a spiky post-punk band to sort of like almost competing in the same world as Echo and the Bunnymen and U2 to try and become an all-conquering band that I'm sure Virgin wanted them to be. And then I absolutely loved it in the mid-80s when they did dive off in sort of like into the more sort of like pastoral side of their career. And I thought Mama and the Big Express were tremendous records. So I was I was a huge fan. And my first connection with them, the first time I met Andy, was when I was managing a band at university that they never sadly amounted to anything. But they were a kind of post-punk, Talking Heads, XTC-influenced band called Mambo Square. And I'd heard that Andy Partridge was coming to Radio Piccadilly to do an interview to promote Skylarking, which had just been released. So I thought, this is amazing. If there's one person in the world that will really love the band's tape, it'll be Andy. So I hot-footed it up to Piccadilly Radio. He wasn't there, and they said, well, you can wait outside. So I was waiting outside, and then a rather eccentric-looking character shuffled up with sort of like several bags full of XTC records and joined me and started a conversation with me, explaining that he basically stalked Andy all around the country. And then no sign of Andy, but Curiosity Killed the Cat arrived. They obviously, it was relatively, I guess, early in their career. I mean, this would have been about 1986, 87. And suddenly this avid XTC fan was all over them, desperately trying to get them to sign any bit of paper. Anyway, a crowd of somewhat eccentric XTC fans slowly start to roll up. And I'm there waiting for a couple of hours. And finally, Andy arrives with his Minder stroke driver. And I got the chance to give him the tape, and he was exceptionally courteous. Promised me he'd have a listen to it. Never heard from him again. But that was my first encounter. And then I ended up breaking into the music business, and I was working at MCA Music, where I signed Blur. I was very lucky. Sort of like the first band I was able to sign in the music business was Blur. And when I moved across to work at EMI Publishing, I was able to do a deal to bring Blur with me. So I always kept a very close eye on what they were up to, and I was thrilled when I heard that they were going to be working with Andy Partridge, and I was a huge advocate of them working with him, because to me it seemed like a dream come true. They were big fans of XTC and of Andy. I certainly was. I felt it was a really great idea, but sadly the sessions didn't quite work out as I think we'd all hoped. And I think, at the end of the day, the reason it probably didn't work is that ultimately the recordings, which have since aired on a Blur box set, so everyone can listen to them and make their own judgments. I think they're really good recordings, but they do sound very like XTC. So it's which is, I think, what I've always felt with everything that Andy turns his hand to. It always sounds terrifically like him, which is fantastic. Why, that's what you want if you're going to work with Andy. But I guess it was probably just a bit too close to XTC for what Food Records were looking for, and they probably wanted something a little bit more angular and aggressive, given that this was the early '90s and we were living in the shadow of grunge. So sadly, that was passed over. And I've spoken to Andy a lot about it. I think he was disappointed that it didn't work out, and he enjoyed working with the band. But yeah, sadly, it wasn't to be. And then I finally got the chance at EMI to work with XTC in an official capacity, because at the end of '92, as Ronnie mentions, Virgin had sold the record company to EMI Records, and then they sold the publishing company to EMI Music Publishing. So, and amongst the catalogue at Virgin Music was XTC, on a very old-fashioned life of copyright deal, and I got my chance to connect with the band. My first bit of proper work for them, which turned out better than I expected, is each year as a publisher, you get to recommend certain songs for the Ivor Novello Awards. And I put forward The Disappointed, which had recently been released as the lead single from the Nonsuch album. And I mean, this is what normally happens. You can't nominate every single song that's been released on your publishing roster that year, because I think you had to pay £50 to put it in. And even though clearly EMI was a very wealthy company, we were also, my bosses were certainly a lot more prudent than I was. So I had to argue quite hard to get The Disappointed put forward. But the great news was that it actually got accepted and was nominated for an Ivor Novello Award, which I was really, really delighted about. Sadly, it didn't win, but I think it's great that Andy got that recognition, and he certainly deserves to be up there with the very greatest, on the Ivor Novellos. And then that gave me sort of like a bit of an intro to Andy, and sort of like he was aware that I was actually capable of doing something useful, which I don't think he'd ever necessarily felt the same about Virgin Music. And I went down to meet him, and I was a bit more nervous about going down to meet him, not really knowing what I was going to get in terms of a response. I'd read enough interviews with him to know that he could be a little bit spiky, and he didn't have the highest opinion of people in the music industry, understandably so. And I went down to his house in Swindon and was directed by Marianne, his then wife, to find him in the pub where he was drinking with a group of his friends. So I joined him there, and it was following an interesting path of conversation before he then took me on a walk round Swindon. We bought a fish and chip supper to have back at the house, and I think some more drinks were bought along with that. And I went back to the house and got to meet Marianne properly, and also got to meet Holly and Harry, that were his children, who were quite young at the time. And it was interesting. I was hoping I might hear some new music, but sadly that was not to be the case. Although I did get to go inside his studio which was the shed in the garden, and got to see some of his collection of paintings. I think he was interested in the fact that I draw and I paint. So I've got a lovely drawing that I did of Andy on that particular day. And he was fascinated that his publisher would come along and want to do a drawing of him. And I think he was also bemused that I was a lot younger than he expected. I was 27 at the time, and I think he had a view of music publishers being older, quite tweedy characters. So he was just assuming that a slightly bulky character in his 50s was going to turn up. So, yeah, I was a bit different to his expectations. But he was showing me some lovely paintings, and he was a great collector of sort of like naive and primitive art. So he showed me some fantastic sea paintings, and showed me his model soldier collection. But sadly, we never got round to every time I tried to bring the conversation back round to music or discussing that, I'd find it incredibly tough to pin him down, and anything on where the band were going to go after Nonsuch was hard to avail. And then sadly our paths diverged for a while because he essentially got out of the deal. I think by breaking with Virgin Records, ultimately I essentially was just looking after the catalogue, and it wasn't really going to be about future songwriting, which is what I would have loved to have got involved with. Sadly, we weren't able to do a deal for that. But I did, I kept in touch with Andy. We'd speak from time to time. And I got to know Erica, his new partner, very well. And she was an aspiring singer-songwriter herself. So she'd often send me music, and we'd often have conversations about her career. And then when I moved to run Columbia Records in 2006, I was very keen to try and find a project I could work on with Andy, because that was always, I'd tried in the past, and I'd sent him some young artists, some up and coming artists to work with. But I think Andy was keen to sort of like explore the notion of songwriting outside of XTC. Like many artists who've built a career writing incredible songs for themselves, when they're suddenly put into the world of professional songwriting, where an artist will come along and you'll go, right, well, today we're going to write a hit single about what happened to you on the way to the recording studio, or what did you do with your boyfriend? That's a million miles away from the world that Andy's in. And I think the songwriters, the artists that I sent along to him, who were in the, I guess, slightly more formulaic pop area, didn't really work with him. And I think he found it quite a frustrating process. But when I was at Columbia, I was working with an artist that was very much more in the lane of where Andy's from. It was an artist from Merseyside, from the Wirral Peninsula, where I'm from, called Miles Kane. And Miles went down and really connected well with Andy. And they ended up writing writing a lot of songs, probably about 10, 11, 12 songs together. Sadly, I started the process and actually got the record being made, and then my time at Columbia came to an end, so I wasn't overseeing the finishing of the project. And some of those songs got used, but not all of them. But again, I kept in touch with Andy, and as I move around the music industry, eventually in 2016, I find myself at Warner Chappell, and there's an opportunity to work on Andy's catalogue. It's only the latter part of his catalogue, so really it's just Apple Venus and Web Stars. It was also an opportunity to work with Andy as a songwriter again, and again, some of the challenges that I'd flagged earlier came up, but Andy did, where I felt he was always really good was I'd go to him with a brief, and he'd come back to me with some brilliant ideas. And I did go to him with the Liam Gallagher brief to write with him, and Andy came back with a couple of songs that that I thought were fantastic, but I think Liam felt probably sounded too much like Liam, with a lot of Andy in there as well. So sadly that never went further. But I was, I can't take any of the credit for it, but it was wonderful to see the work that he did with the Monkees at that time, and to sort of like be sort of like shepherding that along a little bit. I left Warner Chappell in 2020, end of 2019, and sadly, sort of like that was, I kept in touch with Andy. I'd seen him since, but that was the last time our paths crossed professionally.
Again, I've got a million questions for you, but I'm going to come back to them later and go first to Ben Wardle, who listeners to this podcast will remember was the host of a podcast, because at the Neo Ancients Festival, Ben interviewed Hugh Padgham about English settlement, which was earlier this year, and ended up possibly unwillingly or unplanned as on the podcast as a result of my bootlegging activity. Welcome back to the podcast, Ben.
Hello, Mark.
You've got many strings to your bow. Tell us about some of the strings of the bow and where those bows are aimed at XTC.
Okay. God, I feel like people's life stories are entwined with Andy Partridge, don't they? I don't feel somehow as worthy as Ronnie and Mike talking about my time with Andy. But yeah, I mean, like everyone here, I think I loved XTC, frankly, from day one. One of the very first singles I bought was Statue of Liberty. I still have it, in fact. So yeah, I never got to see them live, which was one of the few regrets I have in life, actually. I remember actually going to see them at the Lyceum when the Lyceum didn't have The Lion King on in it. It appears to have been on there for like 50 years. But prior to The Lion King, they used to do gigs, and we went to see XTC then. It was sold out. Gigs, I'm sure gigs didn't used to sell out in the way that they sell out now in 10 seconds. We just thought we could rock up to see them, but we missed them. Anyway, as a preamble, that's my obsession with XTC, which, I still have to this day. I was very excited in the mid-90s. By the time the mid-90s came along, I'd already worked for Warner's for a bit as a talent scout, and I had started at RCA, and from within RCA had started what subsequently became known as a Mandy, a kind of major label sponsored indie, in order to sort of get into the indie charts and bypass the stigma of signing guitar bands to majors and then having them not taken seriously by the rather snobby British music press. So I had a number of bands on that label, like Sleeper and 60 Foot Dolls and the Wanna Dies, and but my chief love at that time, I suppose, or certainly because we used to hang out together a lot socially, was Stephen Duffy. And we had released his self-titled Duffy album in 90, I think it was 95 that came out. So we were working on the follow-up, which ultimately came out as I Love My Friends. I've actually just been looking at the Indolent, which was the name of my label, the Indolent edition of this, to see how Andy is credited, because Stephen and I were talking about producers, and at the time I was having some success, as many people were during that time, with Stephen Street, who was producing Sleeper, and Stephen had already worked with Stephen when he was signed to 10 Records. So Stephen was working on that record with Stephen Street. But we decided that it would be a lovely idea. I can't quite remember how that idea gestated. It was quite probably me just banging on about wanting to, get Andy involved. We decided to try a couple of tracks with Andy. I still somewhere have a little Olympus cassette. If you remember answer phones prior to digitization, you had a tiny little cassette in your answer machine. And I saved this cassette because on a Saturday, I was out at the time. Quite possibly I lived in Camden at the time, which was in those days was the law. And there was a message when I came back from wherever it was I'd been, from Andy himself. I think I'd phoned him or contacted him. It was pre-email, so I'd contacted him about working with Stephen in the week, and he had phoned me back at the weekend And it was just such a lovely message in his accent, which I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to do an impersonation of, but it was this lovely sort of his gentle kind of lilt, the Wiltshire lilt that he has, just saying, "Oh, hello, Ben. You're probably out Saturday, isn't it? So you're probably out buying records," which is probably true. Actually, but it was really lovely. It's just saying, "Well, thanks for phoning me, and this is Andy," and it was this long, kind of waffly message, but really lovely. And I was so proud to have this thing. And eventually, we organised the session, which at that point he was working in Chipping Norton, I think. Can't remember the name of the studio. Other people on this podcast might remember it. And he and Stephen spent a week or so working there on 2 songs, one of which was called What If I Fell in Love with You, and another at the time was called Shining Star, which I forced Stephen to change the title to You Are. And it's a beautiful record. So just going back to I know, Mark, you originally requested us to think of XTC songs from the period with which we were involved with Andy, and that it isn't an XTC song. It's a Stephen Duffy song. But like Mike said earlier, it has, as everything Andy touches, lots and lots of the DNA, the Partridge DNA, all the way through it. And is a really wonderful song. I urge people who haven't heard it, XTC fans, to dig it out. There's not a particularly happy end to this story because guests this week are all have industry experience, and we all know the kind of constant swings and roundabouts of the music business. And we had a new boss came in, and he decided that Stephen Duffy's record was not going to be released, which was a terrible shame. The record ultimately ended up coming out on Cooking Vinyl. It's a great shame for me, I have to say here on this podcast, because I'm looking at the liner notes here, extensive classic Stephen Duffy over liner noting, as he likes to do. But he's dedicated this album to me, and it's called I Love My Friends, by the way, which really made me very happy. But sadly, it never saw the light of day. And when it came out on Cooking Vinyl, there was I think probably the painful process of being dropped from RCA. Some of the tar from that process was smeared over my face. So I don't think when it came out, I don't think it was dedicated to me anymore. And it's a great shame, because when the lovely Pete Perfides re-released this record a few years ago on his own Needle Mythology label, named after one of Stephen's other songs that we had released on Indolent, the 2 Andy Partridge songs were put onto a separate 7-inch that came with the album, because I think by that time Stephen had decided that they were part of a separate, they had a different sound to the overall direction of the album, which I thought was a great shame, because it is the original compiled version that we did and that came out on Cooking Vinyl I thought was a lovely record. But of course as people change their minds about things. But it's a really, both the songs are really good, but particularly You Are, and it's got a very regimented, in the way that Andy was involved with at that time, that kind of was on Wasp Star and Apple Venus. It's got an incredibly, almost metronomic kind of motoric backbeat going all the way through it, that was, I think Stephen, if memory serves, at the time found quite stressful to work with that automated Germanic kind of beat that Partridge was interested in at the time. But it really does work. So that was lovely. I'm going to fast forward a little bit later. I had been working at V2 as Ronnie kind of opened the door. I was involved with the closing of the door at V2 when we got bought by Universal, and myself and the head of A&R, Charlie Pinder, went off and formed a management company called Riot Act. This would have been in 2008, 9, around that time anyway, end of the 2000s. And the first act that we wanted to manage was a band called She Beats, fronted by the aforementioned Holly that Mike mentioned, who by that time had kind of grown up from the small child that Andy sings about on Holly Up on Poppy. and it was a classic sort of Bangles type all female fronted new wave act, and on paper and indeed on stage they were just absolutely fantastic. And Holly had kind of inherited a lot of her father's knack with a tune and has an amazing voice, and Charlie and I were dead set on managing the band. So I remember this very clearly, driving with Charlie to Swindon, early days of sat-nav. I think it's when you had to sort of, almost pay for a small person to sit on your dashboard and guide you through streets. And we got there, we got to Andy's house, we drove to Andy's house, and it was almost like going to somebody's house to ask for their daughter's hand in marriage. It was that kind of a situation, and we kind of knocked on the door and were shown, and it had the extra kind of additional frisson of that because of Andy's interest in antiquity and Victoriana. So we sort of we were taken into the front room of his absurdly modest house. I thought it was, for someone who's such a kind of Goliath of the pop world. There we were in this Swindon front room with the toy soldiers kind of on the side table. And it was very warm and genial with us, and despite our nerves, made us feel very comfortable, and said it was, again, I suppose, knowing what we've just been talking about with his mistrust of the music industry, the fact that not only did we want to manage his daughter, but both of us had kind of lengthy previous as insiders in the music industry must have made him think, Christ, I've got the Cray twins in my front room. But bless him, he let us have a go at managing his daughter. Sadly, we didn't manage to get them very far up the charts. We did a brief tour with Baby Shambles, I think, and financed an awful lot of rehearsal time and songwriting. But it wasn't to be. Yeah, I've been in touch with Andy several times in a kind of journalistic capacity since then. But those are my times.
And they're brilliant times that they are. And I have to apologise actually to Yui for being as patient as he has been. But what I'm getting is a strong sense of the hard work that goes on behind the pop music frontage that we see as consumers, and the She Beats being a case in point, great band that didn't make it. It's hard work that doesn't always get paid off, and Stephen Duffy being another example. There's lots and lots of people that you see working really, really hard, and you think, why has this band not made it? Another band has. Yui, I'll come on to you, and I'm coming on to you because you're the most recent to have been engaged, and your perspective from New Zealand, I take it, is towards the end of XTC's career with Wasp Star and Apple Venus. Is that right?
Yeah, but not associated with those two albums, but you'll understand in a second. Firstly, I just want to point out I'm a recovering Australian. I've been living in New Zealand for 21 years. But when I first fell in love with XTC, it was when I was growing up in Sydney. And so, Mark, you asked for a song. The song for me is The Disappointed, but it doesn't sound as grim as that. But you'll see, because you've heard Ben, you've heard Mike, you've heard Ronnie. You know that some of these threads end in disappointment, and I guess the threads I'm about to share with you guys end in disappointment. It's just not what I was expecting or I felt the band deserved. You know what I mean, Mark? So my Kiwi wife, who I met in Sydney and married in New Zealand, she wanted to move and live in the UK. So I'd never lived in the UK before, she had. And so I just rocked up in the UK. My background's project management and helping organisations achieve their strategies. And I still can't work it out. I was thinking, Mark, as the other guys were chatting, how did I end up at EMI? But I can't explain it. But I ended up in EMI Records, working for EMI Records, but not in the music side. It's really important that I doff my hat in the favour of Ronnie, Mike and Ben. They were in the music industry. I was peripheral. I was there to help EMI deal with the illegal copying of CDs. How could we lock CDs down? And I hope that Mike and others might confirm that EMI Records had those black stickers as an attempt to try and stop people from, they were trying to protect the CD technology, and it wasn't working. And so I was asked, not for technical reasons, I was asked because I could pull people together and make things happen, to see if here's some experts, here's some people, here's some challenges, could we do something? And so that's what I was doing in there. So I was there leading a project to try and protect people from ripping CDs. And it was around that Napster time. It was around that sort of the rise of the MP3. It was around that time. So that was my angle. So I was working quietly on that in the IT area and the digital part of EMI. But then what I found was that you meet people, you know, on the other side, the music side, the real side of the business, if you like. And then before you knew it, and maybe some people might recognise these names, before I knew it, I got involved with Wendy Day from Parlophone, and then later with Jason Day at Virgin. And it was very convenient for me because I'm a massive Beatles fan. I'm George Harrison reincarnated, I like to think in my head, and massive Beatle fan. So being able to connect with Parlophone and have access to lots of, they call it merch, and something called blagging, which was new to me, where you'd go and they'd give you a CD single from an upcoming Beatles reissue, or they'd give you, a notepad with John Lennon paper on it, and just goodies like that. Well, I got to know Jason Day, and before I knew it, Jason Day was sharing with me the Virgin reissues of XTC's albums, and then one day I was talking to Jason, and I heard him and another guy chatting, and neither one of them wanted to call and talk to Andy Partridge. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. They didn't want to talk to him because they said the call will go on forever and it will be difficult. And I said, I'll do it. And they said, what do you know? And I said, well, I know XTC really well. I love XTC. I'd love to talk to Andy. I'm happy to do it. I reckon maybe if he was speaking to some sort of chirpy, naive, overly confident Australian, he might be different, And so they said, all right. And they told me what they wanted to do. And what they were trying to do at that time was they were considering releasing all the singles as a CD single box set, and all the 12 inches as a 12-inch CD box set. They said, this is what we want done. But before we do, we're thinking of releasing a new compilation of XTC. And the idea was it would be called XTC 24, 24 being 24 hours in a day. And the idea was that it would be made up of 3 CDs, one called Morning, one called Afternoon, and one called Evening. And the idea was to select from their catalogue songs that captured the sounds of a morning, the sounds of an afternoon, the sounds of an evening. And so they asked me, they said, do you know XTC? I said, at bloody oath. And so I suggested a bunch of songs that could make up those 3. And then began, believe it or not, guys, faxing between Andy and I and Colin and I, from the EMI fax machine, so back and forth. And look, guys, my favourite is Andy, if you're allowed to have favourites, so I'm not saying anything bad, but I found Colin was reasonably easy, and he'd settled on his view on what the CDs should be. But Andy kept tweaking and changing and tweaking and changing and tweaking and changing. And so I had to keep going back to Jason saying, well, Andy's made another change and he's made another. And so I started to see what Jason was saying, but it's not a negative. I just think, I just wrote here, you might call Andy fussy, but I'd say he was particular. I'd say he was very particular, and he thought about things, and he obviously went to bed and woke up the next day thinking, no, that probably is better. So in the end, he suggested I come up to Swindon and we just do it over a table. And you can imagine I didn't need a second invite for that. So I got on the train, went to Swindon. Ben described the arrival and the house perfectly. Very modest house for what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting a mansion. I knew that XTC hadn't been, in that league, but I wasn't expecting a house that modest. But it was a beautiful house, very warm house. You could see it was very much a family home, and had the pleasure of meeting with him. We did our business, and he wanted to take me to his favourite Indian restaurant. So I had a curry with Andy in his favourite Indian restaurant around the corner. And then he took me into his shed. I never saw XTC live, but I can say I saw Andy Partridge live because he played me 5 songs in the shed, including a song which all I remember from it, which I think came out on the Fuzzy Warbles, was Kaiser, something about the Kaiser. You may remember that track. Yeah, so essentially not in the music industry, but lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time, heard the right conversation, and got to meet Andy. And I just found him to be extremely charming, an amazing, lovely host, never boring, always talking about something, always anecdotes, lots and lots of anecdotes. I remember from Andy, him encouraging me to always look after my health, make sure I looked after my teeth. I don't know why I remember these things, but it was quite impactful. Got a photo with him taken by Harry where he's just received his birthday present. It was around early December from Dave Gregory, and Dave had built him a guitar. He'd taken a Castrol, a tin, an oil tin, and attached a neck of a guitar to it. So I've got this photo of me with Andy holding this weird guitar, which he played his concert with me on, which was a gift from Dave, which was quite a weird contraption of an oil can attached to a guitar neck. So I guess I call it the disappointed because, as you guys would know, the CD singles box set never happened. The CD 12-inch box set never happened. The XTC 24 album never happened. It was just too hard. And I felt that my only feedback would be that if Andy had just stopped at some point, I think some of this stuff could have happened, but he just kept tweaking, kept protesting, kept saying, I don't want that track on there. And I don't know him like these guys do, but I just felt that if he could just have, just stopped. You know how they say perfection becomes an impediment to progress? So I guess he was looking for perfection. He sought perfection, and maybe he didn't have enough people around him, or enough people at EMI Virgin who had patience, who could, stick at that stuff and maybe just help him. There was nobody I felt firm enough with him. I couldn't be. I was a fanboy. I was starry-eyed. There wasn't enough people who could actually say, hey, Andy, let's have a chat. Let's accept this as an acceptable level of okay, and then maybe a bit of pragmatism, would have been useful. That's my take on it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share that with you guys.
No, it's great to hear you. And did you also tell me that there was artwork involved, like ideas for artwork sort of were in the air as well for it?
Oh yes, that's important, Mark. It was the artwork that's where it fell down, because I think Andy, what EMI Virgin wanted was, you may remember chill out music was all the rage in those days, and you guys might remember there were like glossy photos were the order of the day on those compilation albums. And so what EMI Virgin thought would be nice was classy photos you might see in the Cosmopolitan magazine of a morning shot, maybe like with a breakfast plate with a sunrise and a window in the background, and for the evening a cocktail glass with with some sort of coffee table. Can you guys picture what I mean?
Yeah, terrible idea.
Yeah. Yes, Ben. I thought it was brilliant, but maybe I was just naive. But basically, but I thought it was great because it was very different to what XTC had. I had no issue with that, but I thought, I was 33 at the time, and I thought, how do we open up XTC to a different audience, a new audience? Because just to go off track for a second, Mark, when I look at my XTC collection, I like to think that they're worth mega dollars, some of these items. Like, I've got those cassettes, Jules Verne and The Bull with the Golden Guts and Window Box. But then I'm thinking, at what point is there peak XTC? Will there be enough fans and collectors coming through who will one day buy those things, or will they be found in an op shop for $1 in 10 years' time? And so for me, I was thinking, even then, being a greedy man like myself sometimes at times, I was thinking in 99, surely this is a great way to open it up to the 20-year-olds and the 25-year-olds at that time. So using that photography, that stylistic or that seductive photography could be a way. So that's where I was coming from, Ben. I knew it was nothing in the league of XTC's beautiful artwork. Yeah.
And what you're saying, it's sort of come full circle circle because it reminds me what I was going to say to Ronnie when you were talking about that experience being a press officer, dealing with XTC at the point that Mama was on. And, XTC were had sort of disappeared from view as far as the music press was concerned, and they came back just like they weren't playing live, and then they produced this artwork that was kind of as obscure as literally obscure. You couldn't see who these people were. But you if you look at the other bands that you have worked with over the years, Culture Club, Alison Moyet, Kula Shaker, Stereophonics, how unusual were XTC in that regard? Were they completely eccentric from that point of view?
I think what you was saying, I think that was the deal breaker in your compilation, because artwork was sacrosanct, Andy.
Yeah.
That was his thing.
Yeah.
It was, he would walk away from things if he didn't get his way. And we ended up using that photo session, but it's rotten. I think the passage of time, the use of it on the reissue, and it was a concept. If it was used in the concept of an album, fine. But I think even the compromise on the CD was some of those awful photos of them wearing double denim and looking thoroughly miserable. So it didn't really work on any level, to be honest. But nice concept. The concept, it was high concept, but the reality was, that local papers throughout the land wouldn't use them, So, and you could see why. But even then, the ones that were just the mugshots were awful as well,
I always imagine that other bands didn't pay as much attention. I mean, you can see some of the albums that people release, very high profile, very famous, big selling albums. And you look at the cover of it and you think, who designed this thing? And actually, maybe I should bring Ben in as well, because Ben is the co-author of a book called The Art of the LP, which beautifully celebrates all of that work. So, feel free to chip in from the visual point of view, Ben.
I mean, I'm always surprised that Andy allowed other artists to do the band sleeves. The fact that most of XTC's career prior to them leaving Virgin was that there were other designers. Am I right? I think. I mean, perhaps Oranges and Lemons, he was quite involved with that concept. But certainly, I remember when I interviewed him a few years ago in Bath. I asked him about the Go-To sleeve, for example, which I think is a brilliant, conceptually, of just absolutely brilliant, timeless sleeve. And he said it's because they were sent to Hypnosis by Virgin to do the second album, and hated every single thing that Storm Thorgerson or whoever it was who was there showed them. And as they were leaving, this was on the wall. That was on the wall as a sort of and in classic Hypnosis style. They had these ideas and they would just try them out on everyone until someone, normally Paul McCartney, said yes. The fact that he would just allow that to happen. When you describe those, the high-res shots of Breakfast,
the glossy,
it just sounds like something that New Order would have done, and it was right for New Order, but totally wrong for XTC. It just felt, there's a real feel. I think that Andy, even though he allowed other people to do it, he certainly exec produced most of the singles. I mean, some of the single sleeves are just phenomenal, aren't they?
Gorgeous, yeah.
No Thugs in Our House is
wow.
It should have won awards, as a sleeve. And similarly, the Making Plans for Nigel animation game and everything, it's just brilliant, and as a kid, and still as an adult, I think it was them and the Malcolm Garrett sleeves for the Buzzcocks, which kind of made me as excited about pop music as the music itself. Life Begins at the Hop with its own fucking record player. Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I just remember that the sleeve to Go To, I think, had been tried on about 20 other artists, and they'd all gone, "No, I'm not going to use that." As is frequently the way with a particular marketing manager will be desperate to get through an idea, and every band has turned it down. And they'll literally be reaching into the bottom drawer and going, "What do you think of this as a great idea?" and selling it as something fresh when everyone's turned it down before. Same with video ideas. You just know that they keep on getting rehashed and rehashed and rehashed.
Yeah. But Hypnosis were absolute like past masters at that. Like they'd have one idea and just flog it until someone accepted it.
I thought what you said was saying about, you know, the frustration that there was no one at Virgin really fighting the corner towards the end. And I think that's very true. And I think that happens a lot with artists that have been on the label for a long time. I think Squeeze, who are another band that I love very much, experienced something similar at A&M, where people just feel like, oh, they've been around forever and it's yesterday's news. And it's absolutely vital that a band has real champions within the company that are going to drive them through regardless. And that's, you know, with the new band, they usually have a relationship with the A&R person that signs them, and they're the ones that get everybody in the record company excited. And I think when you've been around for a while, all the people that worked with you when you were having all your hits have moved on to other things. And I think a lot of bands can get left behind. And I just think it's a real shame that there wasn't somebody at that time in their career really pushing and championing them. And you see that with colossal artists as well. I've seen it with Springsteen. I've seen it even with Bob Dylan. You know, you marvel, how can it ever be that, you know, not everybody at the record company is doing everything they can for this legend. But it goes in waves. I think things are better now, and I think there's a lot more respect for artists who've been around for a while and who've got serious catalogue at the company. But certainly, I mean, even, you know, in the mid sort of like around about 2015, when I was working at Virgin, I'd be talking excitedly about reissues that they were trying to do, and I'd just get the business affairs people going, oh, God, they're so terrible to deal with. And that was the attitude of the company. And it's just, you know, I was going, but this is amazing. Well, you know, this is fantastic. God, you should be falling over yourselves. I can help you with this. And it was hard.
You were at Virgin when they did the kind of anniversary shows, right? Because we went to see...
Yeah, that's right. We went down to see Colin.
Yeah, and was there any move towards trying to do something live with XTC at that point? Because I know that obviously Simple Minds did a thing and Public Image did a thing. And
I've got to be honest, I've never gone down that particular road with Andy. Although in my head, I've, you know, thought about if you were to be able to get the band on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or you were to be able to get the band to pick up a collective body of work award from the Ivor Novello, so all three of them or four of them would be together in a room, perhaps there would be that opportunity to maybe do something. But, you know, again, I've been fortunate enough to sit in a room whilst Andy has played his guitar to me, and I feel phenomenally privileged to have witnessed that. But I know that he is never going to be, you know, is never willingly going to go onto a stage with XTC and perform. And it just isn't worth going there.
Just picking up what Mike said, the big watershed for them was Simon Draper leaving Virgin. You know, Simon, you know, is on record. You know, they're his favourite band. You know, that he ever worked with at Virgin. You know, even despite the difficulties, you know, he loved that band. And when he was gone after the buyout in '91, you know, there was nobody in there, you know, fighting their corner. So.
And that point you were there, Ronnie, there was people like Al Clark who were obviously his job was to promote all of the acts, but certainly in the stuff I've read, I've never spoken to him. He was really committed.
Al had moved to Australia by the time I came in.
Is that right? Right, yeah.
But you know, there was still, you know, it came from the top, you know, and you know, everybody was fans. But you know, there was at that time, you know, bands like Simple Minds, you know, Heaven 17, you know. We'd hang out, Rip Ring and Panic even. We'd hang out in the offices, and you went that wee extra mile for them. We never saw XTC. I never saw them. You know, I think I met them. I updated their biog over the phone, put the press releases out, cleared them one day. But I don't think I met them till that photo session. So you know, there was no real plan from their end. You know, it was they'd made the music and it was coming out, and yeah, I think it was a bigger shock for Geffen because Geffen had just licensed them before that. I think Mama was the first album that came out in Geffen, so I think they were pretty surprised with what they got, to say the least.
I didn't think there was a problem with people advocating for XTC, Mike. I felt that the time I was there they had a lot of fans at Virgin who wanted to do things like release a CD singles box set, like the Stranglers got. They wanted a CD 12-inch box set. They wanted a new compilation. They were very keen. So I didn't feel there was any issues as an amateur. I didn't feel there was any issues with people advocating for XTC. What I felt was there wasn't somebody who could actually particularly, because remember, I regard Andy as a friend. I just wrote to him yesterday and wished him happy birthday, all that sort of stuff. And he knows me, and so I regard him as a friend. So I'm not bagging him. But there wasn't somebody, I felt there was somebody missing as a person who might just wrangle kindly, professionally, supportively with Andy and say to Andy, just stop, and why don't you just accept it here at this point? I didn't have the mana or the leverage with him because I'd only met him. And so I was just curious as to, can you guys give me an insight into what typically happens? And is there that person who sometimes sort of calms some of that dangerous enthusiasm, I call it?
I think you mentioned the Stranglers there. Artists like the Stranglers who are still touring to this day.
Yep.
Need to refresh the catalogue, and it's in their interest to refresh. You'd taken the live equation out of XTC. So there was no live booking agent, had any relationship with Virgin from that point on. Management-wise, as I say, latterly I dealt with Paul Bailey, but I'm not sure anybody was holding the reins from a management point of view.
So what you're saying, Ronnie, is had they had a manager at that time, that manager could have been the one to sort of shepherd Andy.
I don't think you could have managed XTC. Andy once said to me, "We're the most dysfunctional band in the world. We're all mental, and I'm the sanest in a lot. I'm the sanest, and I'm mental. So that's his own description. He said they were dysfunctional. So it'd be a hard job to manage. An active gigging, recording, fully functioning XTC, I think.
It's interesting because, it's talking about XTC and management. I met Paul Bailey on several occasions during the Duffy thing, and he was lovely. But I think perhaps he was kind of like a caretaker.
Yeah, he was absolutely that. Yeah.
And I didn't know. Obviously, prior to their first manager, that there were issues with, which we won't go into here. I wasn't aware that there were other managers, but I am.
Tarquin Gotch, wasn't there?
Well, I was going to say one of the things now, of course, easy to say after the event, is it would have been interesting to get Tarquin Gotch or indeed Emma Kamen, who worked with Tarquin Gotch at the time, to talk about the process of managing XTC. Perhaps that's on a future podcast.
That's a podcast, Mark.
I think it'd be very, very interesting. Because to go back to the original question, I'm sure that is what was needed in terms of getting those box sets together. Yourself, because it wasn't just the Stranglers. I remember I got several of those boxes. I think maybe it was a different time, but there was a Buzzcock, there was a Duran Duran one.
Yeah, I've got the Jam as well.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been EMI though, would it? That would have been. I'm just thinking of.
No, I'm just saying. I quite love my CD single box sets. They're quite cute,
All of these bands from that period were getting that treatment, and I'm sure that the conversations that the record label were having to get them done were not with Pete Shelley and Simon Le Bon. They would have been with those artist representatives, and therefore it would have been a much more straightforward process.
Yeah.
The other side of management that the conversation was reminding me of, both Ronnie at the early end of XTC's career, Mike at a later end, both of you talked about the dodgy deals that you thought, or maybe not dodgy, but they might have been dodgy, but B, at the very best, they might not have been in the band's favour or as good as contracts that other people had. Having seen other people's contracts, how bad a deal do you reckon that XTC got?
Bad.
Yeah, from Virgin's point of view, that was a standard deal.
Yeah.
The Skids were on the same deal, and in fact, you wanted us to pick a track, Mark. So I'm going to pick something from Drums and Wires because I was with Stuart Adamson, who's, God rest him, an old pal, and he'd got an advanced tape of Drums and Wires when they were doing the Days in Europa album. And I just remember us putting it on, and it was just the greatest thing we'd ever heard. So When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty, I think, would be my choice from there.
Very good. Very good.
But I can remember Stuart bouncing around that. But also interestingly, Bill Nelson, whose Red Noise wasn't without its XTC
isms,
influences, isms. I think he heard it, and is it any mistake that Red Noise didn't make another record after that? I don't know. Maybe that's just coincidence. but no, that was a standard. The cross-collateralized deal was a standard, and Richard Branson didn't get where he was today by being a charity.
But it was a fairly standard. It wasn't just Virgin. It was a fairly standard.
Yeah, the cross-collateralized deal. If you had a publishing company, you would offset one against the other. So.
But also the life of copyright element to it. That was fairly standard across all labels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a standard.
No rights reverting to the artist.
But it's a real tragedy that the artists are not in a position. Those songs will never revert back to them. And you look at artists that had, stronger representation, that have obviously been able to sell their catalogues on or sell a part of their catalogues on to the many funds and companies that are out there and, are doing that for millions of pounds. Yeah, absolutely. And
it's a pension fund, isn't it?
A major contemporary of XTC have just done a deal with Universal, and it's like for the next 5 years, and it's for £12 million. And I just think it just really upsets me that the band were never in a position to be able to do that. When the deal finally came to an end, which was after the release of Nonsuch, that's when they were able to sort of like go on to 3-year administration deals. So Andy's in a position, and they're in a position, should they want to sell the publishing for the last 2 XTC albums. But clearly that's not where the real value lie. I mean, musical value, certainly, but the financial value, the royalty stream lies in the Virgin catalogue. As Ronnie and Ben pointed out, a 50-50 life of copyright deal, if a record company or a publishing company could have done it, particularly in the 70s, they weren't charities, and the people that ran them were pretty hard-nosed businessmen. They weren't music fans like me and Ben that were just really grateful to be there, and were probably much more in the camp of the artists than we ever were in the camp of the people who paid our wages.
And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently, in light, you triggered my memory of it when you said, Mike, about getting the nomination for the Ivor Novello Award, is that recently, because of what Terry Chambers has been doing with EXTC and also the various cover bands, that when you see one of those acts and you're sort of seeing it slightly removed because it's not actually XTC in front of you, with the exception of Terry on drums, I am continually reminded this is an amazing collection of songs. Forget about the recordings, forget about whatever. These are songs worthy of winning Ivor Novello Awards, and all of the stuff that you were doing in terms of getting Miles Kane and all of the other My Failed Songwriter career candidates is a recognition that Andy is a Tin Pan Alley quality songwriter in that classic mold, which it's easy to forget, I think, sometimes because you associate it so much with the band and so much with those fantastic recordings.
And I'd argue Colin as well.
Oh, yeah. The whole songbook, yeah.
In terms of a Tin Pan Alley element, arguably, you could say that Colin had more of that. In terms of like being a little bit more straightforward with his song structure and adherence to traditional choruses.
Yeah. And again, I got that feeling when TC and I played in Swindon. It's that set of, here's a fantastic set of songs, whoever wrote them.
Exactly.
I was going to use a cricket analogy. Colin Moulding has scored fewer runs but has a higher batting average. That's all. So if you get cricket, you know what I mean? So, and that's why you needed both in the team. You needed the high run scorer who batted more, scored more runs overall, but Colin had a higher batting average. That's all.
And thinking about songwriting, Mike, you made the observation that Andy tends to sound like Andy, but he's also counter to that. He's also a very good mimic, and you also said that he sounded too much like Noel Gallagher. There's a odd sort of pull in both directions there, isn't there? That he wears the clothes too well.
I think particularly when we were pitching the songs for Liam, it was a case of Liam didn't want to sound too much like Liam, and I think that was the frustrating thing. I was trying to steer Andy in that way, but it still felt very much like a traditional Oasis song. Just on the subject, I mean, I'd like to do a similar thing to Ben in terms of choosing one song. I'd love to go with "Better Than That" by Miles Kane, because to me that feels like a song that you could have imagined on something like the Black Sea. And it's great that Andy could still write those fantastic power pop songs, but recognise that he needed a different kind of personality to sing them than himself at that age. And the great thing is Miles is out there, and Better Than That is still in his set to this day, and it sounds fantastic.
Oh, that's good to know that he's still doing it, because I haven't seen him live, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, so Andy will be earning money from Miles taking those songs around.
Bit of PRS for Andy.
Bit of PRS every night, yeah, thank goodness. He'll be earning a lot more from PRS than he ever will from Spotify.
So wrapping up all this fantastic conversation we've been having, could the story played out any differently? Was it inevitable that this is the story? Because
that we're all disappointed.
That we're all disappointed, because there's also a lot of joy along the way. I mean, it's not an entirely depressing story, but there's just that feeling of a potential that wasn't realised as much as all of us would have liked it to have been realised.
It goes back to what Ronnie was saying about a bit Bedazzled. I'm always reminded of Peter Cook and people saying, how awful it would be to fully realise your potential. And that's it. I live in great hope, and I'm thrilled that I managed to meet my hero from when I was an adolescent and get a chance to work with them and make a tiny impact on the story. And I have great hopes that there'll be more music from Andy, maybe not from XTC, but maybe it will be. And what I found so thrilling about XTC is that they got better on every single record they made right the way through their career. They left at the in such a pinnacle. Those last two albums are mind-blowing. So I think they realized so much musically, and maybe the broad population did not get to appreciate them, but I must admit I'm slightly suspicious of mass taste. I think the overwhelming opinion of people doesn't always get it right.
Yeah, and the opposite, the two things are connected, aren't they? Unless you've got that bloody-mindedness and that commitment and that what you would call that sort of particularity and that attention to detail, then you can't achieve Apple Venus. It's not possible.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the fact that Mike, who I've known all my life, who is one of the most successful music industry executives, says he's slightly suspicious of mass taste. Come on. Yeah, I'd like to take you up with everything you said, and just I think there's one word for to maybe counteract the disappointed is the my favourite XTC song, and certainly I think the best song on the final record, Stupidly Happy. It is just anyone who puts that level of absolute pinnacle of their songwriting ability on their last group album is worthy of this admiration.
Two chords.
Yes, I'm starting to think that should be at my funeral. Stupidly happy, but I used to think
Yes.
wrapped in grey, and that's just too obvious. But yes, stupidly happy is the one.
Mark, I feel like I came up with the disappointed to describe things, but at the time when I said it to you earlier, I also said there's another side to it. Like, I always regarded growing up the Beatles and Pink Floyd as heavenly, and I was raised in a religious family, and I rejected religion, and so I regard the Beatles, Pink Floyd, the Stones as signs of heaven. Whereas XTC, the reason why I feel much closer to XTC now that I've accepted my atheism, and by the way, when I chatted to Andy, he had no problems about becoming worm food. He put that term in my head. He said he had no issues with becoming worm food. He didn't believe in a higher being. So I see XTC as a grounded or earthly band because I had contact with them. They were real. And the mistakes and the foibles are there for us to see, on both sides. So I regard XTCs very much as earthly, grounded, more my type of band, rather than those stratospheric, almost hard to believe, successful, ultra uber out of this world success that those other bands have. So I'm very, very happy to be connected in a very small way, in an earthly way, to a grounded band, and with a person who doesn't promote perfection in the form of Andy, who believes he's comfortable with becoming worm food. So they're my band. I love them for that reason. Yeah, they're more me.
That's lovely. Yeah. I think I should rename this podcast Worm Food. That should.
I was going to say that's my new favourite Andy Partridge song.
Yes.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, we should. I'll call him up and get him to write it right now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's been fantastic. I've really, really loved this conversation. Thank you very much to Ronnie Gur, Mike Smith, Ben Wardle, and Yui Mura. Tremendous. Thank you for all. Actually, just thank you for all of your efforts over the years in doing what you did to bring that music to people and give us so much delightfulness. So thank you very much for joining us. And
thanks, Mark.
We'll have to have you on again. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.
Thanks, Mark.
What do you call that noise?
Thank you very much to Jordan Cooper for the music, to Ronnie Gur, to Mike Smith, to Ben Wardle, and to Yui Mura for their fascinating stories. None of this could happen without the many wonderful podcast supporters on Patreon, who include the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnett, Kevin Burt, Lorenzo Charchi, Gail Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Alison Eels, Jeff Barris, Evan Fish, Mike Grafe, Robert Graham, Camille Henry, Stephen Hope, Alan Hughes, Marek Kraus, Jesper Kumberg, Robert Lawlaw, Adrian Loon, Liz Lynch, Murray Meikle, Yusuf Murrah, Max Nyaho, Amy Parkinson, Tim Parsons, Mark Reed, James Reimer, Jaime Ross Demora, Michael Sutcliffe, Steve Swift, Mark Thomas, Nigel Waller, John Wedemeyer, Lucy Verbitsky, and Martin Whitley. That's all for now. See you next time.